Hey guys, I got another quick tip video for you real quick. I've had a few calls and emails about how you figure out on a tapered belt exactly where to taper a belt, or like do the measurements the same. They're not really any different, so your measurements are going to be the same. So if you're following us and you follow some of the I think in our ebook and then some of our articles, we tell you that, you know, add 10.5 inches to whatever their belt measurement is. That's bend to the hole they wear it in on their existing belt. And so if you add 10.5 to that, then that gives you your cut length for your blank. And so if you're going to do a tapered belt, that measurement's the same. That doesn't change. What I've done is we used to try to figure it out. You know, I had a math formula and stuff. We just did it real quick. But I ended up making a jig because guys in the shop, it's easier just to grab a jig and it ends up right every time. So we made a jig. I will have this as a free PDF. You can go on there, click the link down in the description, and then you just put your email address in and we'll send you the free PDF of that. And so you can print it out and make you a jig similar to this. All I did was take a little belt drop off and then just tapered it down. But I've got the stop here for the bend, and we'll show you what that means and then kind of how we do it. But I'll also give you the math to that in case you don't want to make a jig, or you just want to know kind of what the measurement is or whatever. Then I'll kind of show you where this came from. But if you want the jig, link is down in the description. Grab that, just click on that, put your email address in like our other stuff. It'll send it to you and you'll get it. But that's free, absolutely free, but it'll help you on your tapered belts. And you can make one of these for a 3/4, a 1 inch. You can do, if you do a 1 3/4 inch down to a 1 1/2. I have one of those too. It's just like this, works the same way. So let's get over here. I'm going to show you on a belt blank exactly how we're going to taper a belt. Okay, so here we have a 1 1/2 inch strip of 9/10 ounce leather. This is what I use for my belt bodies. You can get by with 8, 10, just somewhere around there, 8 to 10 ounce, something like that. These are for if you're going to line them with 3, 4 ounce leather, 2, 3, 3, 4, somewhere around there. That's going to end up giving you a nice belt with a nice weight. It's not going to be too heavy, but it's not going to be too light. I don't recommend this weight for single ply belts. Just real quick, if you're going to do a single ply belt, I would recommend going with somewhere around 12 ounce or something like that. It's going to be give you a much better belt. If you're not going to line it or anything, just single ply belt, I would definitely go with a 10 to 12 ounce leather on that. And here's our jigs. Here's the one I was just showing you. This is the exact same jig, but 1 3/4 inch tapered to 1 1/2 inch. We do a lot of 1 3/4 belts. A lot of people like them. They're real comfortable. They give you a lot more room to tool. So 1 3/4 is pretty popular here. But we're gonna just do the 1 1/2 because I've got an 1 1/2 blank that was cut and it's extra, and so we'll go ahead and get this cut for a belt. So what we're gonna do first when you're doing a tapered belt, obviously, is first get the size. We're gonna pretend that the belt that we're about to build is gonna be a 38. And so what you're gonna do on a 38 is you're going to add 10.5 inches. That was their bend to center hole measurement, bend to hole measurement. So whatever hole they wear on their existing belt that they're already wearing with that type of buckle, you would measure from the bend, not unsnapping it, just measuring from that bend where it goes around the buckle to whatever hole they're in. And so it doesn't matter first hole, last hole, an added hole, it doesn't matter. Whatever hole they wear it in, that's where you measure to. And so we're going to pretend that this customer was a 38 to that. And so what we're going to do is add 10.5 inches, so that's 48.5 inches. And so we'll cut this belt blank 48.5 inches from end to end. And that is what we call your cut length. And that's where, you know, the entire belt, that's accounting for a 3.5 inch bend for the snaps and a 7 inch tip length. So the tip length would be from the center hole out to the tip. A lot of your manufactured belts are going to be a 5 inch, maybe a 6 inch if you're lucky, but it's not quite enough tip length, especially if you're going to put initials out here or a brand or a logo or something. You're not going to see it past that first belt loop, much less behind the buckle. So we want to be sure and have enough of that. If you're building belts for guys that rope calves, as far as like calf roping and stuff that use a jerk line, or guys that just want more hanging out, a longer tip to where it gets out behind the buckle, or maybe they have 3 initials, you can go to an 8 inch tip. So we're going to go ahead and do this here for a standard 7 inch tip. That's just what we do on all of our belts, unless it's requested that it be an 8 inch tip. And so what we're going to do is go ahead and put our jig on there. It's real simple. Just butt it up to the end. Make sure it's straight and centered. If your jig's straight, you just want to kind of be sure it's running down the center of the belt. And then we'll take a pencil and we'll just trace all along here to our tip. And get a good tracing. And now there you can see our taper comes in here. It's and you can adjust the severity of this taper. If you want it longer, you can just float that out a little bit more. Float it out on your jig though is what I would suggest, and that way you don't have to do it every time. You'll make your jig to where it's right, and then it'll work, and you don't have to make adjustments or kind of, you don't have to fiddle with it to make it work. And so here, now we've gone from 1.5 inches to 1 inch. And so that's going to work there. What we're going to end up doing now is we're going to come to this end on the pattern. If you get the pattern deal, you have a bend stop is what I put on there. And that basically tells me, because your taper is going to be different on this side as far as where the taper starts than it is on the other side. And I'll show you why in just a second. But what we'll do is that bend stop, we just put that mark at the end of the bend end of that belt blank. And that is where it stops. So you can see how much hangover we have over here. That's absolutely fine. That's where we want it. And so we'll hold that down, and now we'll bring this and trace that off. Now what I usually do is just kind of move this back. Now trace the tip off. And that will finish out the bend. So as you can see, this side is much shorter than the other side there. And there's a reason for that. Mathematically there is, because what we're going to do is, if we do the structure of the belt, so if we look at our belts, I do a 3.5 inch bend. So from the end where the buckle's going to be, from the end, I put a 3.5 inch mark. And then we come down to this end, and this is your billet end, or your tip end. I do a 7 inch tip, so we'll put a mark there. So that means from here to here, that's tip. That has nothing to do with the man's size. We did this belt for a 38 inch, so what we'll do is we'll measure from here at the bend, that 3.5 inch mark. We measure from there all the way to that mark at the 7, and it's 38 inches. And so that's the actual size of this belt. And so that's actually the belt structure. So this stuff out here has no bearing on the belt whatsoever. So when you're laying out floral patterns, even if you watch the video on how you center a name, you take the bend and the center hole measurement there, and we'll split that in half, and that'll give us the center of the belt. So if we go from the bend at 3.5 to our center hole measurement, which is 38, that'll give us 19 inches. That's the center. So if we come into there, 19, 19. So now we've got our center mark. That's where you would put a name. And so you would just have to center the name right in here, okay? And then what you can do to check your jigs, if you want to make sure that you're correct, is to just go from the center to where your taper starts right there, where it starts to come in. You can come in here and you can measure from center to that taper mark is roughly 14 5/8. Basically figure 14 3/4 is where we'll be. And then we can come over here to this side and check it as well. 14 3/4. Basically, when you're doing a taper, when the man is wearing it, depending on the buckle length, sometimes this will throw you off a little bit, but if it's going to be true center, the center of your belt and then your taper should start at the same distance from the center of the belt. So if you're trying to just figure the math out here on your own and make your own jig, that's absolutely fine. Find the center of your belt and then come off however far you want for your taper, and that'll basically let you figure out where you need to be. One thing I'll caution you on is you want to have at least 7 inches here of your taper, because you're going to have maybe a keeper, the buckle, whatever is going to need to slide on here where your snaps are. So you need at least 7 inches, double the bend basically. So 3.5 times 2, it's going to give you 7. So that taper needs to start past that. Same thing on this end here where your billet end is you're going to want, if your middle hole is 7, then we're going to come with another hole at 8, then another one at 9. You need to have at least 10 inches of tapered area, because if you've got a buckle trying to hit that last hole, if you get in here too close where your taper starts, you're not going to be able to use that last hole anyway. And so you want to be sure you've got at least 10 inches. I've seen some guys where they'll do 12, and so then they'll figure out, they'll start their taper at 12 inches back here, because that's what they want to see. And then basically just measure from those marks to your center, 14 inches, then come over here and measure from center 14 inches, and that'll tell you where that taper needs to start on the bend end or the buckle end. But the main thing is keep those tapers even, the same distance from the center of the belt, and that way when your customer's wearing it, both of them will be at the same point on the front of the hips. They won't be one off one, you know, one side and one closer in the front. You want them very even, and so they look nice, and so the belt looks square on your customer. And so that's how we're coming up with that, basically. And that's, like I said, that's the jig. It's very simple. You don't have to put too much thought into it, but it's just trying to get it even. I think the main thing is finding your center of your belt and always working on your belts no matter what you're doing. Ranger belts are very similar. You want to always be sure and work from the center out when you're laying out different things to where it's got to match on the person. Because you got to remember, this goes like this when you're actually wearing it. It's very easy to get confused and just think of a belt as a flat linear object, and you know, it's really not. It's really a three-dimensional deal. When it's on, we want all those things square and even. So that's tapering a belt. I hope that helps. If you got any questions, let me know. Again, if you want the free pattern for this, click the link down in the description and pop your email address in there, and you can go ahead and grab that. Thank y'all very much.